Okay, perfect. All right, everybody. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is I've got about 10 questions or so from the community, most of the doctors and healthcare practitioners have sent me some. I'm going to go over those questions with everybody, and then I'm going to do a little Q&A as well. A lot of the questions that I've gotten tonight have been around genetics, DNA testing. I'll just say this as polite as possible. My neighbor, who's one of my closest friends, he's a very world-renowned gastroenterologist. You guys have seen him on TV. You probably know this guy. And he just had his first lesson in single nucleotide polymorphisms and genetic testing 2 nights ago at my house. And he's so blown away by the technologies that are out there. He had no idea that this type of testing even existed. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that many practitioners don't know much about nucleogenetic testing. They don't know much about single nucleotide polymorphisms. They don't know much about it because we're not trained on this stuff in school. And if you're like me and you graduated over 20 years ago, this was all brand new science back then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the questions, answer some of those, and then take some Q&A from you all at the bottom of the hour with this thing. So let's just kick this thing off with some of the questions we've got. The first questions are about the Biolimitless DNA Discovery Kit. And people are asking questions, how does it work? How do people understand? How does it analyze the DNA? What kind of testing do you use? What kind of security is there? It's a lot around the actual genetic profile test. Now, we've done videos on this, and there are videos on the Biolimitless.direct app. You'll be able to have access to those. And then on our website as well, and on YouTube, you'll have these. But let's talk a little bit about the testing that we're using. So our genetic profile is, we don't do a swab anymore. We have a spit test. So you're going to get a little tube that you're going to get a chance to spit in. And what's really interesting is the swab test. I would occasionally have either not getting enough of a sample on the swab, we'd have to redo it, or there's a reason why it says not after you've eaten or drank anything, because sometimes when you do a swab, there's like a little piece of your lunch or a piece of broccoli or kale or something in there, and that can throw off our genetic sampling just a little bit. But the test itself, when you get the test, you're going to register the test on your own. Okay. So when you register it, you register through a QR code that's on your, that's in your kit. That doesn't have your name or anything like that written down or associated with it. So when you have the test sent off, it's HIPAA compliant. It's compliant in all over Europe, all over Asia, all over the globe. We have the highest level of compliance around these tests. And the only time that your name is attached to your genetic test is whenever you download the app, which when you get the screen to QR code the DNA test, you're going to get a chance to download the app as well. We are going to put the app on Apple and Google. At first, we weren't going to, but we've decided that we're going to do that so people can download those apps. Probably this week, it'll be out there. But let's talk a little bit about the testing that we're doing. So the type of test we're doing, you can write this down. We use whole genome sequencing. And so if you're familiar, there are lots of genetic profiling tests that are on the market. So there's single nucleotide genotyping, there's whole genome sequencing, there's array testing, there's polymerase chain reaction, PCR testing, etc. We use the whole genome sequencing. So when we use a DNA test, we're looking at the entire genetic code. So most of the other genes that are being measured, or the other tests that are out there that most are measuring, are usually just the single nucleotide polymorphism genotype. And it's not the most accurate, but it's accurate. I've used those tests before. If you guys know my background, I've been in the molecular genetics lab space for 16, almost 17 years now. And a lot has changed over that time. We still use a lot of PCR testing in our practices for lots of reasons. And we shifted everything 2 years ago from the single nucleotide polymorphism genotype to the whole genome sequencing. And for those of you that want to talk about accuracy, whole genome sequencing is a 99.9% accuracy. It's the highest level of accuracy out there when it comes to genetic profiling and genetic testing. So the type is the whole home genome sequencing, just so you guys understand that. Additionally to that, what type of markers and measures are we looking at? So we measure 800,000 SNPs. So I just shot a video, and the video compared the top five businesses or companies globally that are doing genetic profile testing. There's about 100 companies, labs, and et cetera that do this type of testing globally, around 100 of them, okay? And so we took the top 5 that are the most common that you see on social media, that your doctors are running in their offices, and we did a side-by-side comparison of those. So you'll have that video out this week. It talks about the pricing versus the success rate of the testing, the validation of the testing, and et cetera. And after I did that and showed it to everybody, most of the people on our team said, why aren't we charging more for these tests? Because we're running the highest level of medical quality testing for single nucleotide polymorphisms that are out there. These are the same tests that you would run in a doctor's office, in a lab. And then the app, the information that you get from the app with the machine learning AI and et cetera, it takes it to a whole different level. And by the way, when you get the app and your genetic test is downloaded on the app, you're going to have around 189 to 190 page printout. And that printout goes into all the different categories of the genetic measurement. So it's going to measure, for example, your dietary needs. So it looks at how do you metabolize proteins? How do you metabolize fats, carbohydrates? It's going to look at the nutritional vitamin segments of your SNPs, all your fat soluble vitamins, your B vitamins. It looks at all how your body handles amino acids, and it just breaks all those things down individually. It then looks at your stress levels, how your body handles and manages certain types of stress. It measures the genes for neurotransmitters and gives you a good idea of like your dopamine drive and your serotonin drive, and really lays a whole cascade out from a physiological standpoint for the patient. It also tells you how your body handles certain types of what are considered drugs, including caffeine, right? It can tell you, are you someone who gets, who gets anxiety from caffeine? Are you someone who has insomnia from caffeine? Has all those genetic markers in there. There's a lot of genetic markers that we don't run, that we can run, or at least we don't report on, because we're not using this as a diagnostic test. This is not a medical diagnostic test. So what does that mean? That means we're not using it to diagnose, cancers or neurodegenerative diseases or any cardiovascular diseases. This is a nutrigenomic test. So we're looking at the single nucleotide polymorphisms that exist. We're also looking at the nutrigenomics. Nutrigenomics is a study within genetics and within nutrition. And what that study does is, over the last 20 plus years, they've identified genes that if you have certain lifestyles that you're going to have a higher expression of certain diseases and disease processes. So that's the technology that we use on that. Let's see. How is Biolimitless DNA discovery kit different? Customers want to know. I think I've explained that. The accuracy is 99.9%. It is the most comprehensive genetic profile that's on the market. It's the only one that I could find that measures that many genes. Just so you guys know, I used to sell this exact test in my office for $2,500. We then were able to get the volume pricing up, and I was able to lower that, and it was $1,250 was the cost of this test. Now, just so you guys know, some of the other tests that are on the market, and I'm going to go ahead and just name some of the names of them, like the 10X Health test that's out there. That's a great test, right? It's a $599 test, and it measures 5 SNPs. 5, okay? Not 800,000, measures 5. There's a DNA Fit test that's out there. Really great test. I've done that before. It measures 31 markers, and it's a $500 test as well. There are lots of other tests that are out there that are measuring DNA and then developing custom supplements for that. I'm going to tell you something. I worked on a project to try to do that for many, many years, and we were fairly successful, but mostly unsuccessful. And I know that may sound like a weird kind of way to explain it, but we were successful in the fact that we were able to identify a lot of genes that were problematic for people. And then we were able to identify the action steps that needed to be taken for those genes. But what we failed to be able to do is recognize the importance of lifestyle change more than just take these supplements. Because here's what I want everybody on here to understand. Biolimitless is not a Vita Vita Vegemin company. It's not a product company. It's not a Me Too company. We're all about a parallel healthcare delivery system. And our soft launch that we're in right now, we're only releasing 2 formulas and 1 diagnostic test. You guys know that we have a 24-month rollout that's going to allow us to build an entire ecosystem of functional medicine and functional medicine and functional neurology into our ecosystem, and give people what I feel they should have, which is free will to choose how to take care of themselves. And we know, because we talk about this all the time, that self-care is the real healthcare. But I'm going to tell you, as a doctor, and many of you on here are doctors, doctor is Latin for teacher. Many of you are not helping your patients take care of themselves, right? We're trained as physicians. If you have this symptom or you have this positive test, you give a patient this drug and that's it. Well, we know that that's not working. We live in a society right now where chronic disease is higher than it's ever been. In fact, chronic disease, thank God, has finally made it to the political forefront, to where we have politicians, and I'm not getting political, but we have politicians that are going, wait a minute, we have a really bad system that's one of the top 3 killers of men and women on our planet, in our country, and it's causing more of an economic problem than anything. And we have the ability to change people's economics by changing their health. So the type of insights that you'll get, which is another question, from the Biolimitless Discovery DNA Kit. What is it? It's how to change your lifestyle. Like, I just had a conversation with a woman this morning. Let me just tell you this, as a practitioner, how powerful this is. So the conversation I had with her this morning, this woman has had migraines. She's in her mid-70s. She lives down in Texas. She's got migraines, fibromyalgia, and rheumatoid arthritis, and she's had horrible GI problems for over 40 years. And she's, quote unquote, tried everything. She's even been to the Mayo Clinic, did their whole, 5-day deal at the Mayo Clinic for 20 grand, and left with a diagnosis of autoimmune disease. And so we ran the genetic profile test on her, and we found many, many imbalances in her system. Number 1, she's not processing carbohydrates and sugars. Number 2, she's not processing fats like she's supposed to. But the biggest thing was she had a genetic imbalance called MTHFR, which, if you know anything about genetics, you know that that is one of the predisposing genes for thyroid issues, which she had. That's one of the biggest predisposing issues for autoimmune issues, which she had. It's one of the biggest predisposing issues for gut issues. And the biggest reason, Dr. Steve's right, it's methylation. The reason why that's such an issue for her, why she developed the gut problems, is because her body is literally like kryptonite allergic to gluten. And her whole diet and lifestyle has been, all she eats is bread, pastas, all this kind of stuff. And she can't figure out why she's so bad off. And her doctor just put her on a list of medications and supplements. One of them was vitamin B12 because she was very tired and her liver was stressed out, which makes sense. But when somebody has a problem with MTHFR, they have to be on methylcobalamin. She was taking cyanocobalamin, which literally is poison for her. She was also taking folic acid, which she needs folic acid for her nerve regeneration because she's getting neuropathy issues. She's got a form of insulin resistance that's leading to neuropathy in her fingers and her toes. Of course she needs folic acid, but she needed L-methylfolate, not needing folic acid. So those 2 medications that her doctor prescribed for her are causing more harm than good. And he didn't know that because he didn't have this test for her. So the breadth of the depth of the information that you get as a layperson is huge. But as a clinician, if you understand that, for example, your patient, let's say your patient's having protein metabolism issues. Well, no wonder they're going to be having joint problems and joint pain. No wonder they're going to be having issues with hormone production. No wonder they're going to be having problems with insomnia, anxiety, and depression. If you can't handle proteins at the genesis, that's the problem. So instead of treating all of her darn symptoms, why don't we just go after the problem in its poor metabolism of proteins? Put that patient on some plant-based multi-enzymes, have her tweak her diet a little bit, chew her food up, and next thing you know, boom, everything's fine. So the information we get is deep. And we also have the ability, now I'm just telling you this as practitioners. once we get into our second phase of production with this, we have the ability to do a pharmacogenetics with this. And if you understand pharmacogenetics is telling if someone is a fast or a slow metabolizer. We're running the whole genome sequence. It's going to be able to tell that with the patient, but that's not something that we can give out to lay people on their own. But you, as a practitioner, are going to have access to what do we call a Helix portal within our system, so you can actually have access to that information on your patients, which is huge by itself. I mean, understanding if someone's a fast or slow metabolizer of medications can tell you how to better prescribe dosages for people, and it can ultimately save their lives. I will tell you that if I'm a physician with a DEA license prescribing narcotics, I certainly would like to know if my patients are fast or slow metabolizers for lots of reasons. So the information that we can give on this is deep. And don't forget that right now we have over 300 plus genes out of the 800,000 genes that we can report action steps on. What does that mean? That means that the scientific community within the body of work of nutritional measurements of genes, nutrigenomics, has agreed. We have agreed as a scientific community that if you have these genetic SNPs and you do X, Y, and Z, it can help you have reduce your risk of problems long term with that. Now, we have to be careful in what we say. The reason why we have to be careful, it's unfortunate, and it's not a play on words. We just can't say prevent, treat, cure, mitigate, or reverse, because those are pharmaceutical words, okay? Doctors, you know that. But the reality of it is if someone has MTHFR and they can't methylate and they can't digest gluten, if we're able to tell them that at an early age, do you understand the amount of prevention that truly can happen for things like migraines, fatigue, depression, anxiety, autoimmune issues? I mean, MTHFR is one of the biggest reasons why women can't conceive babies or carry a baby all the way to full term. So knowing these gene SNPs are so powerful, but this is all about self-education. We want to give our patients the information so that they understand that okay, this is my genetic code and I understand how to take care of myself, right? That's a super important thing. All right, so that's a lot on the DNA test. I can come back to that if anyone has questions at the end. By the way, the last thing I'll say about the gene test is the 800,000 tests that we measure, 300 of them are actionable right now. What about the other 700,000 plus that aren't? Well, as science grows and we get more of a consensus on accepting nutrigenomic and lifestyle changes for certain genes, we will be able to share that through the Helix portal as a practitioner, if you're running this through your practice, or if you're just doing it as a layperson, you're going to get a push notification and an email saying, go check your app. You have an update on your genetic profile. I'm going to give a similar analogy, but completely different, because what 23andMe does for their gene testing, it's a different type of gene testing than we're doing, right? But you know that as 23andMe gets more data and information, your genetic profile changes, doesn't it? Because as more data comes in, the AI technology that tells where people come from gets more precise and more specific. That's also going to be happening with all the data that we're collecting globally. And by the way, last thing I'll tell you is we don't keep any of your information in any type of biobanks, or we don't save it. It literally gets incinerated the day that we run the test. It gets incinerated. And first of all, that's awesome. But second of all, that can be a big pain in the butt, because, for example, I had a patient of mine who, very well-known nutrition person, created a huge nutritional product line that you see on TV all the time as well. And I ran the genetic swab with him. By the way, this was when we did the swabs in the mouth, and he had a big old piece of kale inside his test, and I didn't know it. And the test kind of came back problematic. And I asked them to rerun it, and they had already incinerated the test. So I just want you to understand how much we keep the HIPAA and privacy, and they're all CLIA certified labs. We have our lab partners here in the U.S. and in the EU as well. They're CLIA and CAP certified laboratories. Again, you don't get any higher qualification certifications than that. Okay. Couple other questions are primarily about the nutritional formulas. So, okay, peptides are a big conversational piece, and I'm a huge fan of peptides. Please understand that this whole system is not built around peptides. Have been around for the last 50 plus years. I've used them in my practice for almost 20 years. You're hearing about them a lot in the news right now because social media influencers and people are talking about them. Peptides absolutely have their place. But any of you physicians who have heard me talk about the hierarchy of health with people know that there's a sequence in which we're going to introduce peptides into a healing sequence, and it's usually right after we detoxify the body. So there's a pathway of detox that we typically get into a lot of times before we even start talking about heavy doses of peptides. But peptides, just like a couple of years ago when CBD was a big deal, and even before that when essential oils were a big deal, and peptides are a big buzzword. But most people don't understand what peptides really are. So I'm going to give you kind of the just real quick down and dirty of what a peptide is. When you ingest protein, whether it's from a plant or from an animal, that protein gets broken down and it breaks down into amino acids, other compounds, and then waste products, right? Well, those amino acids, and there's 20 amino acids, nine of them are essential amino acids, which means that we have to eat them every day or else we don't get them in our body. So we get those proteins in our body. Those amino acids go into our body. They go past the stomach. They go into the small intestine. Then they get put into our bloodstream where they then form peptide covalent bonds, okay? And so once they form these peptide bonds, and all a peptide is a strand of amino acids stuck together. Think about your body like a computer, and it runs off of coding, right? Well, a peptide is a code. So that code, it could be as small as 2 amino acids. It could be 20 amino acids. You could have polypeptides, which are huge. They could, once you get over 50 amino acids, it's really considered a protein, by the way, but they still have signaling capabilities. So what those peptides do is they signal to your cells to do work. When I give the analogy about what peptides are, they're really a part of cell signaling technologies. So they help wake up the cells. Enzymes do the same thing. Certain types of microbiota and fungus in the body do the same thing. Stem cells and exosomes do the same thing. There's a type of chemical in the body called bioreactors. They do the same thing. There's all kinds of chemicals in the body that do that, right? And so peptides are a really powerful one that we use in sequence with a formula. So what most people are used to doing is to taking a peptide for a single use, right? That's like taking the peptide BPC 157, body protective composition peptide 157, and injecting that or taking it orally in order for that to improve cell activity. Well, that's great. But what we have done strategically is we've taken small doses, micro doses. Let me say that again. We use micro doses of peptides, and we use other nutrients and nutraceuticals in order to get a physiological response in the body. We also use phytomicroencapsulation. Phytomicroencapsulation is one of 5 known technologies that can get peptides past the stomach acid into the small intestine where it can be absorbed. Now, our data and research has proven with our phytomicroencapsulation that we can get 99% of the payload. So 99% of the peptide or the amino acids or the microbiotics, the fungus, the herbs, whatever. We can get 99% of that past the stomach into the small intestine. And so what that is, that's survivability. The higher the survivability through the stomach acid into the small intestine, the higher you're going to get what's called bioavailability, which is a compound into the blood. Now, when you inject peptides injectably, it depends on the type of peptide and depends on the purity of the peptides and the type of the peptides. I'm going to talk about all that in just a minute. But normally it's between about 60 and 80. Some can show 90% bioavailability. How do they measure that? So they do a blood test, and they can actually, sometimes they can do urine, but they'll do a blood test to measure the peptides. And that's what we've done. And so when we did our original testing for our formulas, we used encapsulation, gave it to the patient. A couple hours later, we drew some blood. Next day, we drew some blood. We found between 60 and 80% absorbability of that peptide. So between 60 and 80% of the peptide we put in the mouth showed up in the bloodstream. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we have survivability and bioavailability of our products. Now, many of you probably know this. Peptides, the amino acids, are typically generally recognized as safe. Generally, okay? There are different categories of peptides that are out there. So let me kind of handle this. Most of the peptides that you hear about on television, like Ozempic and trizepatide and Wegovy, those are pharmaceutical grade peptides. So what they did was the pharmaceutical companies took what's called a research peptide. A research peptide is a peptide that doesn't have a categorization to it other than it's for research. What does that mean? It's not a nutrition, it's not a drug, it's a research peptide. So the pharmaceutical industry took that peptide and altered it. They either altered the delivery mechanism or they added a compound to it to make it more absorbable. They either put something on it that degraded enzyme function. A lot of medications that we take are peptides, right? Like, a lot of medications. So they have to put something in that medication to shut down the stomach acid so that it doesn't have a problem and it can get past the stomach into the small intestine. Well, what the pharmaceutical industry did with those particular peptides is they took that peptide, they did a FDA study on one condition, whether it's weight loss, whether it was whatever, and they studied one thing, diabetes. And if it was FDA approved for diabetes reversal. Now a lot of doctors are prescribing those. So a pharmaceutical peptide needs a prescription. Okay, so that's number one. Another type of peptide is a nutritional peptide, and these are things like glutathione, NAD. What else are nutritional peptides? Certain amino acids are considered because they have certain amino acids have multiple amino acids stuck together. That's considered a peptide. Technically, branched chain amino acids are peptides. So there's nutritional peptides, there's pharmaceutical peptides, then there's research peptides. Research peptides are the majority of peptides that you're purchasing and that you're using online and that 99% of people are getting. These are peptides that aren't differentiated yet. They haven't been called a pharmaceutical and they're not going to ever be called a supplement. So like, for example, semaglutide was the research peptide that was taken and tweaked and turned into a drug. And now that tweaked peptide is called Ozempic or Wegovy. Well, semaglutide, the original peptide, is still categorized as a research peptide. And that research peptide is never going to be anything other than a research peptide. It's never going to be a pharmaceutical peptide. It's never going to be a veterinarian peptide. It's never going to be a experimental peptide. It's never going to be a nutritional peptide because that legal delineation allows it to be used from a pharmaceutical standpoint. So I just wanted to make sure that I explain that because a lot of practitioners don't know the different classifications of peptides. We just know that they're beneficial and we know that they're safe. Just like all things, they're safe in moderation. The problem is when people are doing mega doses of them. And that's why we're seeing the problems with Ozempic, Wegovy, etc. When you mega dose it, it downregulates the receptor sites. And then we have all these side effects because of adaptive physiology to that. So the Biolimitless nutraceutical products, are they safe and have they been clinically tested? Yes. Yes on both. Here's what I'll tell you. We don't recommend peptides. It says it on the bottle. We don't recommend peptides for pregnant women. Okay. So if you're under the age of 12 and if 12 and under, and if you're pregnant, we don't recommend those peptides. If you're a physician, on every bottle, it says consult your physician. Every nutritional bottle on the planet says that on there, right? So it'll say consult your physician before doing that. You need to be your own physician, but if you're pregnant or if you have children, you need to make sure that you consult with your doctor before giving it to them. Okay. How do the peptides in the Biolimitless products work? What benefits do they offer? Okay, I think I kind of explained that, but let me explain it a little bit more. So what do peptides do? They signal to the cells to go to work. So they're in a different category than vitamins, minerals, fats, carbs, proteins, because those are raw materials. Well, raw materials need workers to put it to work. Well, workers are, again, things like hormones, the bioreactor agents in the body, stem cells, exosomes, peptides, all that. So the peptides are in that category, just like enzymes that wake the cells up and help take that raw material and put it to work. So that's really the big deal with that. Now, there's a lot of videos that I've already put out on how peptides work and how peptides function. Don't overthink it. Peptides are actually pretty simple in the body. You just like anything, you don't want to overdo it. You drink too much water, that's going to cause mineral depletion in the system. It can cause you to drown. So just be careful with that. This is a good question. A physician asked me, can I combine the Biolimitless nutraceutical products with other supplements and medications? 100%. 100% you can. Let me say this. I know there's a lot of lay people on here too, but I'm sure a lot of the physicians know this. You know that. So we know what like blood pressure medications do. We know what cholesterol medications do. We know what, blood sugar medications do. But do you know to this day, there's never, ever, ever in the history of the world, a study been done that shows, well, how do blood pressures and cholesterol medications work together? Or how does a heart medication work with a blood pressure medication? At least on a study. There's never been multiple drug studies together. That's never happened. Why? Because the FDA doesn't require that. And no company is going to do a study that is not required by the FDA. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the FDA doesn't even have their own scientists and laboratory people that are doing the studies. When you say, hey, my study was good on this, they're literally looking at your study and they're taking the study for face value. They're not reproducing that test in the lab. That very rarely ever happens, just so everybody's clear. And recently, with the changes that have been made in the pharmaceutical industry, especially with the new output of these new mRNA vaccines that are on the market, Pfizer set the new gold standard when they allowed this new vaccine to be put out without studying humans, and they only looked at 8 rats. So it's pretty wild if you think about studies that are really done. They're not as in-depth as you would think that they are in most cases. Okay, so can we combine Biolimitless nutraceutical products with other supplements and or medications? I already answered part of that question, but what about supplements? Okay, so here's what you don't want to have. And here's what most of you do have. Most of you are taking way too many supplements to begin with. Most of you are taking way too many supplements to begin with. When I first started in practice in functional medicine, when I would test people's blood or their urine or their hair or their saliva, I was taught that, you're going to put your person on the first probably 3 months, they're going to be on about 10 to 12 different supplements. And then when you do a re-exam in 90 days, you're going to cut that in half and they're going to be on about 6. And then you're going to have your patients on about 4 products for the rest of their life. That was what I was taught, and what the majority of doctors who do functional medicine were taught the same thing. That's crazy. We need to test, not guess. That's why it's so important that you have a genetic profile done. And once we release it, you have periodic blood tests, stool samples, and saliva tests done, because then you have a real good idea of where you're at. And if self-care is the real healthcare, you need to learn how to take better care of yourself. And doctors, you need to learn how to take better care of your patient's individual needs on a genetic and a microbiome level. So what I've found is that most people are overstimulated with certain nutrients. And most people are taking formulas that aren't beneficial for them. So for example, when you get your genetic profile back, it's going to tell you from a genetic standpoint what deficiencies you're most likely to have because of genetic receptor disabilities. A blood test is like measuring your gas tank of what's here and now. And most blood tests only measures red blood cells, not white blood cells. When we release our blood test, we're going to be talking about how we're doing white blood cell and red blood cell measurements, which is really the key for this, especially for vitamins. But the nutraceutical profile that you get on the DNA panel is going to show you what nutrients your body is doing okay with and not okay with. And if you can get it in your diet, you should do that. But since most people's diet are not very good, you're going to have to supplement based off of your lifestyle. We've been able in the last couple of years from my practices being able to shift patients from taking, 6, 7, 8 different products to taking 2 to 3, maybe 4 maximum. And I really like people being on 3. I find that if we have more than 3, sometimes people need to be on a core 4, but after that, it's just too much. And we're going to teach you throughout this whole process of what's necessary versus what I call luxury. So there's necessary supplementation and there's luxury supplementation, and you being able to decide as an individual and as a practitioner to be able to tell your patients, because I know many of you are going to look at this test and say, wow, Mrs. Smith, you don't need to be on all these supplements. And Mrs. Smith's going to say, well, I like taking this because of that. I like taking this because of this reason. If you can show them that it's not going to hurt them, then that's their decision to take it. And you can simply say, Mrs. Smith, those are your luxury supplements, but these are your necessary supplements based off of your genetic profile. So that's a really powerful tool. By the way, there's been research that's been done over the past 4.5, almost 5 years to show compliance. And there's a 68% increase in compliance. 68 is the number. 68% increased compliance for patients who doctors, we prescribe certain things for them to do, and they do it if they see a genetic profile. They understand that their genetics, their genes, these aren't changing, you guys. This test, by the way, when you do these profiles, for at least from a single nucleotide polymorphism test, it's one and done. You don't have to retest this. Now, we're going to be offering later down the road some more epigenetic testing. We gotta walk before we can run. But eventually, I'm going to show you some epigenetic testing that you can do on an annual basis for yourself and for your patients. That's very, very cool technology, but we don't need to get into that just yet. Okay, another question. How often should I, okay, I just answered it. How often should I do the Biolimitless DNA Discovery Kit and retesting? So from the genetic profile test, this is a one and done test, okay? Now, once we start adding the blood test, the urine test, some stool test, the epigenetics, those can be done on a regular basis. But this test right here is the first test that I do with a patient that comes into my practices so I can have a genetic profile of that person. And that person is going to get that 189, 190 page printout of how to live their life, and the app they're going to have, which I would show you, but it's on my phone and my computer decided to unalive itself this afternoon, or else I'd show you. But the app, many of you saw it in Las Vegas, breaks down every single category of like anti-aging to gut health, to eyes, to skin, to heart health, to you name it. And then you click on that link, and then there's information within that link on each gene that was measured, the recommendations that are made for your lifestyle, and the data that supports that. So it's pretty substantial what you get. And then when you go to that app, you can click on a food plan, and based off of your genetic profile and your calorie intake versus energy output, you can develop a food plan. And that food plan can literally give you how many meals a day you should eat, what meals are going to be best for you, and they can even give you a description and a recipe of how to make that thing, which is pretty sweet. So it's pretty powerful. There's also the exercise program on there. You go through, you answer a couple questions on there, and based off of your genetic profile and your activity goals, it can write up a full exercise program for you, not just for daily exercise, but also for injury prevention, because a huge part of the genomic test that we're looking at is your risk for certain injuries. And it shows you risk for joint problems, muscle issues, tendon problems, but then it gets real specific into things like back pain and Achilles issues. I mean, there's all kinds of real specifics that can happen that you're genetically predisposed to. Okay, so those are the main questions about that. How do I get started with Biolimitless, and what is the recommended process of using? Okay, so here's what I will tell people, and I'll talk about the master microbiotic in just a second. I know everybody's really excited about the peptide formulas, and you should be. I know everybody's really excited about the microbiotic formula, and you should be. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But even more so than that, what I'm more excited is for you all to discover what it looks like, what your genetic profile looks like. And once you go down that path of understanding and how to read that and start taking some lifestyle action steps for you, then you can start sharing that with your patients, your loved ones, your friends, if you're an influencer, wherever in the world you are. But to me, the most important thing is that genetic profile test. Now, just so you know, when you get the test, when you do it, when you spit in that container and send it off, it typically takes about 14 days, up to 21, but typically around 14 days to get that profile back. It's a very thorough, intensive test. And when you get it back, it's pretty heavy. The good news is that we have a tremendous amount of videos to help educate you and your patients along the way on what action steps to take and not to take based off of that gene test. let's talk about the master microbiotic formula in just a minute, and then I'll open it up if anybody else has any other questions. So the master microbiotic formula, I've spent the last 15 years of my practice life combating leaky gut syndrome, dysbiosis, dysbacteriosis. It is one of the biggest true pandemics on the planet, and most people don't even know about it. Most doctors haven't even been trained on it. What's sad is that most practitioners really poo-poo it because they don't know it exists. It's been in the medical research for over 100 years. It just shows you how ignorant most of our colleagues are, right? And I always tell my patients, don't let the lack of education or knowledge your healthcare practitioner have determine the level of health or care that you receive. And I also tell my patients, don't let your insurance dictate the level of health and care you receive. Remember, those of you that were at the event in Vegas, I showed the Medicare guideline. And the Medicare guideline, this is literally a law within Medicare. It says any type of treatment that prevents, treats, mitigates, or prolongs someone's life or improves the longevity of their life is not medically necessary. So they don't want you to be healthy, that you're not a participant in the system if you are. And that's the parallel system that we're talking about that's broken. And we're giving people an opportunity to participate in a system that's not broken and gives them the free will to choose what they want to do with their health. But I will tell you that you're going to find approximately 95% of the global population, that's 95% of the global population, is going to be dealing with dysbiosis, dysbacteriosis, or some form of leaky gut syndrome. They're going to have it, okay? And there's a lot of ways you can test for this. Like, I'm sure you know there's blood tests. You can do a zonulin blood test. It's one of the most precise tests that are out there for leaky gut. You could do a symptom survey. I mean, you could literally just have a patient, take a picture of them with no shirt on from the side before they eat, and then 30 minutes after they eat, if you see a belly that's distended at least 1 or 2 inches, that's leaky gut, right? You could have them do the spit test. I learned this back in the early 2000s from Dr. George Goodhart. First thing in the morning, tell your patients, you want to know if you got leaky gut without spending $1 gazillion? Take a freaking glass of water before you brush your teeth, eat anything, drink anything, or whatever. Fill that glass up with water and spit in it. Spit, just saliva, spit in it, and let that cup sit for 15 minutes. Healthy saliva should stay at the top. It should float. If you have bacteria overgrowth or something problematic going on with candida, yeast, or fungus, that bacteria, that spit's going to streak, or it's going to drop to the bottom of the glass within 15 minutes. That's leaky gut, man. Like, that's how they used to diagnose it back in the day. We can do a stool sample and we can measure, hundreds and hundreds of bacteria in your gut, good kind, the bad kind, and etc. But those are really easy, really simple tests that people can do. 95% of the population is going to have it. And if somebody doesn't have it, they could have a stressful event. They could have a real fun weekend. They could get into some type of a food or even a medication that has salmonella or some bad bacteria on it. And next thing you know, they didn't have it on Friday, but now they've got it on Monday. I find leaky gut, once we fix it with people, comes and goes all the time. The key is keeping the bacteria healthy. If you can keep the bacteria proper inside the GI tract, then the bacteria of your ears, eyes, nose, throat, mouth, rectum, anus are all going to be better. Your skin's going to be less problematic. Your chances of succumbing to strep infections, staph infections go down massively. The chance of developing a fungal or a candida overgrowth infection goes down massively. And those of you probably know this, that candida, you can Google this, candida is known as the great masker. It can mask and mimic all kinds of symptoms. I've personally seen it mask and mimic symptoms of neurological problems with patients in my clinics. I remember when we had a patient that was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And once we cleared up their dysbiosis in their gut, their neurological problems almost all went away, because 90+% of the neurotransmitters that tell your brain to have good chemical function are produced in the GI tract. And so the master microbiotic, it's a formula that we formulated, and it literally takes the place of 3 formulas that I used to use. So it literally replaces, it's a 3-for-1 swap out. So I told you, I'm a practicing physician, so I've got to figure out a way, how do I get my patients to do the things I need them to do and be compliant? Well, I'm finding if I give people more than 4 supplements, they don't take them. So if I can do some combo products, I'm replacing 3 with 1. That means I've got a little wiggle room that I can add some more things to my patients now. And so the master microbiotic has the bacteria, the fungi, and et cetera, that uses the phytomicroencapsulation. That again, 90% delivery into the small intestine, which is where we want it delivered. There's zero question in that formula. Just so you know, 90+% of the probiotics on the market do not do anything at all to a person. They're not even active bacteria by the time somebody ingests them. And so they literally can do more harm than good with some people. That's why I saw some of the physicians a minute ago talking about SIBO. Well, one of the worst things you could do with small intestine bacterial overgrowth is give somebody a bacteria that's not going to be doing the work it's supposed to. Because if you put something that's recognized as a problem inside the small intestine where there's already a problem, now you're creating an autoimmune response. And that happens literally all the time. And so we took the most common bacteria that is normally seen in people who live in the blue zones, that is not an industrialized civilization like we have. We took those cultured bacteria, the master microbes, put them in that phytomicrosphere and put that into the body so it can get past the stomach into the small intestine. And the outside coating of it is a phytomicro, so it's plant-based. So it's a plant-based fiber. So it's a prebiotic. So it feeds the bacteria as it goes through the system. It's pretty cool technology. And by the way, yes, it's spore-based. Yes, thanks, Doc. It's spore-based bacteria, which is huge. I wouldn't use anything other than spore-based. And somebody says, please tell me it's not soy. I don't know where that question comes from, but we don't use soy. Soy is no bueno unless it's fermented soy, and then it's okay. But I would not encourage anybody on here to have soy. It's a phytoestrogen. It can really cause some serious problems. So one of the white papers that you'll see soon on the master microbiotic, we did stool samples of people before and after. And in every single one of them, we cultured 100% of the bacteria that we put into the body. So we know not only is it active, but it can culture inside the intestinal tract. And so that's really an amazing deal. And I will tell you, I have a lot of patients that come to see me with a lot of variable symptoms and degrees of leaky gut, whether it's SIBO, whether it's, acid reflux, GERD, whether it's IBS, bloatiness, whatever, however far down you are the rabbit hole with that, or if you have a full-blown, ileostomy that you've had. And I will tell you that this formula has been very beneficial for all of them. And the cool thing about it is it's not leaving that really bad gas effect. When you put patients on a probiotic, a lot of times it'll kill off the bad bacteria. And when that bad bacteria dies off, you have a Herxheimer reaction. Because of the fungi that's in here, we're not seeing that Herxheimer reaction anymore. So it's in my opinion, it's the best probiotic that's out there on the market. And if you guys heard me talk before in the past, one of my good friends, she's a medical GI doctor, and their practice is all about doing fecal transplants, right? Where they take healthy fecal microorganisms out of healthy people, and then they inject them into the rectal areas, the intestines of unhealthy people, and they get great results. We don't have to do that anymore. And I know some people have taken healthy fecal matter, put it in gel caps, and ingested it. We don't have to do that anymore. Okay, this is like, we live in the 21st century of medicine. Let's practice in it. You know what I mean? Oh man, and I'm just telling you, if you can get somebody to take that, man, you're either let's just not go down that road. But you understand what I'm saying.
All right, I'm going to get to one I saw from Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan here. He's asking, are the BPC 157 Cmax and ipamorelin peptides in the cell signaling formula synthetic?
Okay, so great question. So first of all, just so you know, we use 99% purity for our peptides. All right, 99% purity. I'm going to say this with as much love and appreciation as I can. There's no such thing as an organic BPC 157 or Cmax peptide. So when we make just so you understand how it's made, we use peptides that come from plants and animals. So the peptides come from plants and animals. So they're organic peptides. But when you make something, when you put it together, that is now synthetic by definition. It doesn't come from a cow's stomach or a human stomach or anything like that. So it's organic, but when you put it together, it has that synthetic component. Josh, does that make sense at all?
Yes.
Good. What else?
Makes sense to me anyway. Okay. James Bond here. Is it possible to have a condensed presentation that's not more than 30 minutes, accompanied by slides? If that's achievable, it'd be appreciated. I think you did that, didn't you? Didn't you? You did something recently.
Yeah, it is. But I will tell you, it's a lot. It's kind of hard for me to say, take this, it's good, it fix your problems and be done. Like I need you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So I get we live in a world today where 3-minute or less videos is totally where it's at. By the way, I just recorded a bunch of 3-minute or less videos so that you guys can have access to all those. What I feel the best is if somebody learns something and they're interested in it, then that person then can come maybe watch a little bigger presentation, and then maybe they can jump on some of the webinars we do, because I'm way more interested in educating people on how to improve the quality of their health and change their lifestyles to really truly achieve health than I am for every man, woman, and child to be taking my supplements. I know that may sound counterproductive, but that's what really matters, because I promise you, when we have this same conversation, mark my words, 2025, the conversation is not going to be about peptides anymore. The conversation is going to be about something else. 2026, it'll be about something else. So what I'm trying to tell you is what it's always going to be about with me is your health. And what it's always going to be about with me is self-care. Because the more you understand about yourself, the more you understand, does a peptide make sense for me to have? Does a B vitamin make sense for me to have? Does it make sense for me to eat a carnivore diet or a paleo diet? Is vegetarian? By the way, I've been able to measure people's DNA, and folks that have been, this is not a philosophical conversation. This is just pure science, okay? People that have been vegetarians that I've said, look, you cannot process the protein properly that you're getting from the plants. You've got to have either more protein, or we've got to have some meat protein from animals. Once we've changed them to that, their life changed forever. So all we're doing, you guys, is we're just giving people the roadmap of how their body's designed on how to take action. And John just said it best. Our society lacks the proper education. All of you that are on here that are doctors, look up the Latin term for doctor. It means teacher. Our job is to teach, reach, inspire, and motivate people. It's not to write a bunch of damn prescriptions. We're the third leading cause of death in our country alone. We're the reason why our society spends $5 trillion a year, and 2.5 trillion of that goes to absolutely no benefit for us. If we, and by the way, we now have the time to do this more than ever, because we have the world's ear. We as healthcare practitioners have the world's ear right now, because the last 4.5 years have been complete crap. We've lost complete trust in what's happening, all this kind of stuff. So we have the ability to educate, to give people the chance to educate themselves. Now, Josh, let me tell you this. When you extract amino acids, all right, when you extract an amino acid out of a plant, or when you extract an amino acid out of an animal, do you know what the difference is between that same amino acid?
No, sir.
There isn't one. There's no difference between a plant-based amino acid and an animal-based amino acid. So if I took 2 amino acids out and set them on the counter, and I said to you, vegetarian, you tell me, is there a difference in these amino acids if it came from a cow or from a plant? The answer is there is no difference. And by the way, I will tell you this, those of you there, because I know you're going to ask me, the capsules, what are you doing with the capsules? Those capsules are a veggie-based capsule, right? So we use, instead of a bovine capsule, we use a veggie-based capsule to hold it together, all right? I'm trying to think what else I can tell you about the mechanics of it. Oh, let me tell you this as well. The phytomicro encapsulation, there's actually, it's really a 3-step process, but there's 2 main components. So you have the, let's say it's a peptide, and we have the whatever we're gonna, the plant that we put around it, we spray coat it, it powder coats it. Okay, then it has to sit and dry. So there's a process to this, right? It's not just you make a bunch of pills and throw them away or throw them in a jar. You got to let it sit. Once that sit, then we use the heating treatment. And that heating treatment causes a certain change in the outside coating that protects the plant-based coating around the stomach acid. And I'm trying not to give away the secret that's in the freaking patent, but those of you that are scientists can understand what I'm talking about. When you heat up a certain material, it changes the molecular structure of the outside of that. and it causes it to change in a certain way that I'm sure you can figure out. That's one of our major secrets of what we're doing and being able to deliver this across the gut barrier. What else you got, Josh?
All right, another question here. Dr. Tony Tuning, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that name. I said, I have a lot of patients who have Lyme disease. What do we do to combat this problem? Also, I find that they have mold toxicity and symptomatic fungal infection.
Tony, first of all, man, wait till you get the genetic test back on these patients, because I'm going to tell you, they're all going to have one thing in common, every single one of them. By the way, I studied with Dr. Eric Rentz out of Syracuse, New York for years on Lyme disease. I was in Missouri being told that it doesn't exist, and I'm seeing it on so many patients, it's not even funny. So you're going to find that the majority of people that have Lyme are also MTHFR patients. They have COMT gene and MTHFR, so they can't methylate. Their body can't detox. Our bodies are designed whenever toxins come at it to be able to push them out. Well, there's a reason why if you have 100 people in a room and 100 people have the same tick bite or mosquito bite to get them infected with Lyme or Bordella or any of the cofactors that you have, why do some of them get Lyme and some don't? It's all on their body's ability to methylate and detoxify from that. Now, I'm going to tell you, that's just Dr. Eric's 20 plus years of anecdotal work that I've seen with literally tens of thousands of patients, and also the work with Dr. Eric Rentz and lots of other people that deal with Lyme. It's really sad because Lyme is really prevalent. And by the way, our Biolimitless Centers of Excellence understands that. And we have a really comprehensive plan put together for something known as complex regional pain syndrome that incorporates the same type of protocols that we do for Lyme disease. It's not the peptides and it's not, but that master microbiotic, ooh, that's going to be a real big game changer for that Bordella. That Bordella is not going to like that master microbiotic. Trust me.
I can't read this last. Well, there's a Colin said something about diverticulitis. That one.
So look, I want to keep this tonight about the products and the formulas and the testing. But here's what I'll tell you. I would love more than nothing to be able to come on a weekly basis, which I'm planning on doing, and doing a 1 hour, just, hey, here's what I've seen this week in my practice. What have you seen? What would you suggest? Hey, I see diabetes. How do we handle it? I see diverticulitis. What do you do? Let's have those conversations as clinicians, okay? But there's going to be a very strong disclaimer at the front of that, right? The disclaimer is going to be, I'm not your doctor. You're not my doctor. We're just here exchanging ideas and advice. And you should consult your physician before you make any medical decisions about your health, right? That's going to be the disclaimer. But man, we can totally have those conversations, because that's, just so you guys know, when COVID hit the fan, I was on a Zoom 2 to 3 days a week with doctors from 75 different countries talking about that exact same thing. And as healthcare practitioners in the Biolimitless community, we need to check our egos at the door and figure out how can we help each other get better results within our community, within our patients, right? Like I want to know what you're finding that helps. I want you to hear what I'm hearing that helps. But by the way, because no two people are created equal, like no two people are. Like I will tell you, my wife has an identical twin sister. Her genetic profile was completely different than my wife's, which made me kind of question some things, but it's the way it is, right? So I, Josh, would love to come on regularly and do those conversations, and we will do those.
I mean, I can't be more excited about the future of what we're doing here with Biolimitless. You're definitely, this has been mind expanding for me. I've been super excited, just taking notes like crazy, because, I've just got family members, like a lot of us, that could use this information, and having health practitioners, physicians, doctors like yourself coming together really with the aim of helping us heal, helping us, optimize our health is what everyone needs. It's what we need. And so I'm excited about that. I know the coming centers of excellence are going to be a physical place where we can all go and get that type of testing, even more testing than we're able to provide via mail. But it's been great. It looks like, by the way, guys, I think we have maybe a minute or two. If you want to raise your hand, you can ask a question. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up here. All right. Last thing. How long do you have to take the cell signaling formula and master microbiotics before you feel effects?
Great question. Let me answer this from a physiological standpoint so everybody can hear this. It takes a minimum of 90 days to make cellular changes in the body, a minimum. Now, there's a reason why I do programs with patients on 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. That's when I do my reviews, is every 90 days. Why? Because it takes that kind of time and consistency to make some changes in the physiology on a cellular level that are permanent. There's a reason why when you're a diabetic, you only get your A1C tested every 90 days to every 6 months. Why? Because it takes that kind of time to make long-term sustainable changes. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Someone could take a formula and feel amazing today. They could take a formula and feel amazing tomorrow, but they might take it and not feel amazing the third day. Don't blame it on the formula. I'm going to tell you right now, if you eat like crap, sleep like crap, think like crap, breathe like crap, live like crap, you're going to feel like crap. And I promise you that our supplements are not going to fix that problem. But if you understand what health is, if you understand your genetic profile, if you take responsibility for your health and you're willing to do the right things, we can supplement your lifestyle very easily. And I'm telling you right now, we are having conversations as a longevity global society of living to not just 120, but we're now having conversations with people right now saying we're going to live to be 200 years of age in our lifetime, saying that. And the science is supporting it. But the only way that's going to happen is if you understand how your body's wired and you take the proper action steps to have that. If you have a brand new Mercedes BMW and you don't put the right fuel in it, you don't get the maintenance done, that car is not going to last as long as it's supposed to. That car is done in 2 years. But if you take good care of it, that thing can last for 200,000 plus miles, and your body's the same way. So we gotta change the way we think, because that old level of thinking is what got us to where we're at today. What was it, Einstein that said the definition of insanity is the same thing again and again, expecting a different result? Well, if the same level of thinking exists now, that can't get us to solve the problem. So anyway, I'm not trying to be preaching.
No, I love it. I've got just two more things. One is my own experience of as a patient. So many of you're probably prescribing this stuff or working with it. I, like Dr. Eric said, I kind of radically changed my life and working out, eating, that kind of thing. But being on a peptide regimen exploded my results, just transformed me significantly. Recovery time, cognitive function. Yeah. I mean, it was so measurable. It was hard, but I have to admit, I started with, a discipline of exercise and nutrition first. And I got time under my belt there and started changing things. And and I can't wait to get this product. I mean, I've been asking you I can't wait because I've been injecting myself as like a pin cushion. So I'm looking forward to doing that less. Thank you.
Josh, let me say this before we close it up too, because what you said was so powerful. And I want everybody to understand this. There is no such thing as a magic pill. Like, there's no such thing, right? People have been looking for that magic pill since the beginning of time. It doesn't exist. What does exist is, like Josh said, the right lifestyle, consistency, and discipline. And by the way, not all of us have to look like Josh, right? Not all of us have to, be a beefcake, good-looking guy like that, right? I mean, I've had some patients of mine that were on the cover of Men's Health magazine that were some of the sickest people on the planet. I want you to know that. One of my patients was on the cover of Men's Health magazine 3 times, and they had 3 foot of his colon removed because he had IBD so bad, irritable bowel disease. And I've had some of my patients that if you look at them, you would think that person's probably not going to ever be on the cover of a swimsuit magazine, but they're the healthiest person you could possibly know. So I want you to define health by not just how you look and how you feel, but how you function. And peptides can help you function better. Vitamins can help you function better, but so can living your genetic lifestyle. You're going to hear me all the time say that. Josh, we have a real big, cool, I'll tease it a little bit, a real cool challenge coming up soon. We've created a 45-day process that people can transform their lives over the course of 45 days. And I call it 45 easy for a reason, because it's easy. If you'll just consistently do it, and it can be the beginning of a breakthrough for people that they can't even imagine the game changer that it can be. So look, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that everybody was able to join us tonight. I hope you guys got a lot of your questions answered. I promise you, we're going to have a regular us meeting together, just me hosting a Zoom. I'll do 30 minutes of education, and then I'll do 30 minutes of Q&A afterwards, because the more I can give you guys information to help yourselves, that'll give you information to help other people.